There's a lot of economic uncertainty in the world right now, and I know a lot of us small business owners have some fear around just how bad the economy can get and how that might affect our businesses. And as I've been thinking about this over the last few weeks, I have really been doing a lot of reflection upon what the pandemic taught me about business and about myself and my life. And I thought that now would be a good time to talk about some of these key lessons that I learned about business because we will need to be implementing a lot of these things now as we head into this economic downturn. So I'll jump right into my 10 lessons that I learned about business from the pandemic right after you hit that subscribe button. These are not in any specific order. I just wrote them down as I thought of them. And the first thing that I thought of was that we cannot put all of our eggs into one basket. When we went into the pandemic, my business was about 80% overnight pet sitting. And that side of the business completely dried up overnight. We went from six figures to zero literally within 12 hours. It was the hardest and most painful 12 hours of because I had no idea what was coming next and if I would have a business at the end of it. And as we came out of the pandemic, I have really put a lot of effort into diversifying our revenue sources. It's just so important to have your revenue sources as diversified as possible because economic downturns will come. Pandemics will happen, and these things are out of our control, and we never know what part of our business it's going to affect the most. So if you can be diversified, you will be safer. That leads me right into our second lesson here, and that's that we have to be prepared for the unexpected. The 6 years that I was in business before the pandemic, I just kind of went along as if everything would be the same forever, And when that pandemic hit, it truly taught me that we always have to be thinking about what is the worst possible thing that could possibly happen in our business and what can we put in place now to prevent that from happening, and then what can we put in place to ensure that we can succeed should that thing eventually happen. You really need to think through all of the what ifs and have a plan on how to deal with all of these things. Now, of course, none of us could have seen the pandemic coming, and that would have been very hard for us to anticipate and make a what if plan. But you can think of all of the worst case scenarios that could happen on a day-to-day basis and plan for those. And that comes down to as simple as having an inclement weather plan, having emergency contacts on file for all of your clients. All of these little things can really help on these day-to-day emergencies. And as we head into this economic downturn, part of preparing for the unexpected goes right back to that first tip of diversifying your income. The third thing that the pandemic taught me about business is that nothing lasts forever. No good time and no bad time will last forever. Business truly is like a roller coaster, and it's full of lots of ups and downs and in-betweens. We can see this on a big scale with things like the pandemic and economic downturns. But then we can see this on a more day-to-day granular basis with seeing our favorite clients move away or pass away and things like that. Other competitors coming into our marketplace. There's all kinds of change happening every day all around us. And that's just something that the pandemic really got me to pay more attention to is just the fact that change is inevitable. And that is actually my fourth lesson here. You have to be willing to embrace the change and evolve as a business and as a business owner yourself, or you will not survive in the long run. Actually, coming out of the pandemic, my business saw a huge surge and ended up in a better spot than where we were going into the pandemic because so many of the other businesses around me refused to embrace the change, and they ended up going out of business because of that. But because I was willing to evolve and willing to change whatever I needed to make sure that my business could survive long term, that's what got us through the pandemic. And that leads me right into the fifth lesson that I learned from the pandemic, and that is that it's okay for your business goals to change. Going into the pandemic, those first few years of my business, I had a totally different vision for where I wanted my business to go than I do now. And it really took a lot of like soul searching and just getting in tune with myself and my true inner morals and my personal goals and everything to allow myself to change my business goals. I was really nervous to tell my team members who stuck with me through the pandemic that we were going to be on a different mission and going along a different path as we came out of the pandemic. That was a scary change to make, but the pandemic showed me that because nothing lasts forever and because change is inevitable, it's okay to change your actual goals along the way too. The next thing that the pandemic taught me is that your business is not everything, and you have to make time to take care of yourself. The first few years of my business before the pandemic, all I ever thought about or talked about or dreamed about was my business, bad to the bone. And I worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I loved it that way until we got into the pandemic. And then I had that time to learn how to bake and, do these other things and take up reading again. And it truly showed me the importance of taking time to care for yourself. And actually, I have a sticky note on my wall over here that says, "You cannot pour from an empty pot." And I think that is something that as we all start to worry about the economic downturn and want to put more and more and more into our business, while we may need to do that to a certain extent, we also have to remember that we have to take care of ourselves first. Speaking of taking care of yourself, the next lesson that the pandemic taught me is that you have to have an emergency fund, not only for yourself, but for your business as well. And this is something where I had an emergency fund for myself going into the pandemic, but I did not have a savings account for the business. And that left a very scary situation for me, for my business, and for my team. And now I make sure that I always have enough saved up to cover all of our operating expenses for at least 3 months should the business just dry up out of nowhere. I always want to make sure that I am as prepared as possible for whatever may come our way. And having that savings account for your business and for yourself will save your butt in more ways than one. Speaking of protecting yourself, another thing that the pandemic taught me is how powerful and how beautiful of an opportunity it is to get to build a business in the first place, and then how amazing it is to get to rebuild a business after you have been at it for a few years. It was terrifying at the time, but now looking back on it, I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to actually kind of hit the pause button on what we were doing and the way that we were doing it, and get to take a step back and reevaluate everything, and then really put us on this different path and really change a lot of the things that we were doing. Again, it was really scary at the time, but it was such a beautiful opportunity, and it really taught me to kind of pay more attention to the beauty uh, of these opportunities that we have. And speaking of rebuilding your business and getting on a different path, the next thing that the pandemic taught me was the importance of setting boundaries and setting policies and enforcing these boundaries and policies. Before the pandemic, I didn't even have a business phone line. Every client got my personal cell phone number. That was something that I immediately changed coming out of the pandemic. Not only did I get a business phone line, but I set and enforced office hours where even though we offer pet sitting and dog walking services 24/7, 365, we are not answering the phone 24/7, 365 anymore. I also completely knocked out one of our most popular services that we were offering before the pandemic, and I set much stricter cancellation policies and payment policies. As I was reevaluating my business and kind of figuring out the path forward, I had to make a decision on if I was going to walk away from the business or if I was going to try to rebuild it. And I mean, you guys obviously know that I did decide to rebuild it, but part of the decision to rebuild was that I was going to do it on my own terms. And that meant, you know, setting and enforcing these boundaries and these policies. And yes, we did lose some clients because of it. Yes, we did get some pushback because of it. And yes, some of these newer boundaries and policies probably did slow our growth coming out of the pandemic a little bit, but it allowed us to build a business that was more aligned with me and where I was wanting to go. My 10th big lesson about business from the COVID-19 pandemic was that community is everything. We have to network and build relationships with other local businesses. And I can tell you that that was one of the key ways that I made it through the pandemic. As these other businesses that were not willing to change and evolve went out of business, because I had built good relationships with them over the years, they were more than happy to send their clients to us. And even in the depths of the pandemic, when things were the worst, most clients didn't need our services, but there were still some nurses and doctors and other essential workers that did still need daily dog walking. And my business and a few of the other local pet care businesses were able to come together and actually share a lot of those dog walks to ensure that we could all survive. And it was just so beautiful, so heartwarming, and it's something that I knew the importance of networking and building community with other businesses before the pandemic, but it just really solidified this and showed it to me in a whole new way where now, like, maintaining these relationships with other businesses is one of the most important tasks on my calendar every week. And I really think that if we go into this economic downturn, and especially if it gets bad, building and maintaining these relationships with other businesses is going to be key to long-term success. I really hope these 10 lessons help you think about how you're going to set your business up for success as we go into this economic downturn. I also really hope that hearing my story of having gone through the pandemic and having come out of it will help show you that you can weather anything that comes your way. You can succeed if you have the right foundation in place and if you're willing to evolve and do all of these other things that we talked about in this video. Yes, it will be scary. Yes, it will be difficult. But if I can get my business through that pandemic a few years ago, then we can get through whatever is coming our way right now. I believe in you. I'm here for you. I am rooting for you. If you ever need any help, I do offer one-on-one coaching for pet care businesses. You can head over to my website. It's dougthedogguy.co. You can see all about my coaching services as well as my hiring course there. You can also always shoot me an email with any quick questions or any video suggestions at doug@badtothebonepetcare.com. Just remember that I am here for you and I do believe in you. With that, I'm Doug the Dog Guy, reminding you to stay positive.